So, hi everyone, my name is Supriya. I am the Senior Community Manager at GreyNoise. And today I have a couple of my teammates with me who can wave and introduce themselves. And then we will get to Cody. So Jordyn and Michael, you want to kick it off?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jordyn. I'm the newest member of the community team here at GreyNoise. I started literally on Monday. So yeah, this is my first one. So I'm excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, I think hopefully most of y'all know me from GreyNoise 101, but Michael Sargovikian, product specialist, second member of the community team, no longer the newest member.
Awesome. And finally, Cody.
So yeah, I'm Cody. You might have seen me on YouTube if you haven't. I am a vulnerability management engineer that's been around town with businesses. So I've seen all sorts of different security programs, and I'm excited to talk about how I've utilized GreyNoise in all these different environments.
Awesome. Well, Cody, thanks for that very short and brief intro. Why don't you kick it off with telling us about how you heard about GreyNoise in the first place and your history with us?
Yeah, so, oh man, I don't remember how I heard about GreyNoise. I think I've seen a few accounts retweet them or GreyNoise before. I'm like, oh, it seems like a pretty cool product. And I slowly started integrating it into my daily workflows with vulnerability prioritization. So for those that work in the VM space, I'm sure many of you are, there's this thing in the thrunting or threat hunting community called alert fatigue. We in the VM space have CVE fatigue. So we have all these different CVEs coming in and we don't really know what to do with them outside of like the CVSS score and what we potentially have in our environment. GreyNoise came in because it kind of gave us some information. Oh man, who's calling me? Oh, okay, sorry. I need to move my phones. Anyways, so I use GreyNoise to kind of prioritize a list of different CVEs as far as activity on the internet goes. So, and I could show examples of different queries I have and all that on GreyNoise.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely super helpful. So yeah, let's dive into it. Why don't we I'll let you take it away from here.
Yeah. So, oh gosh, let's see which screen. Do this one. Okay. So, in the VM space, there's a few things that we really care about. We care about, obviously CVSS score. For those that aren't familiar with that, that is the common vulnerability scoring system. It just rates a vulnerability from 0 to 10, 10 obviously being the worst. So think of 10 being like log4j, CVE 2021 44228. We all remember that. And then you got 0, which doesn't exist really. But so we have that scoring system, and a semi-mature security program will typically base their prioritization off of those CVSS scores. However, as you start to develop a vulnerability management program, you kind of want to look at different ways on prioritizing vulnerabilities, because CVSS scoring is typically done by the vendor, and it is the vendor's interpretation of that security issue. The problem with that is, as a vulnerability is released, typically, and I'm going to use the example of Microsoft. I don't want to point them out as a specific vendor that only does this. Plenty of other vendors do this, but they will release a security notification about a particular vulnerability. And this isn't a good example, but they will basically publish it and they won't update it. So an example would be SigRed, the DNS vulnerability, I believe in 2020. They said exploitation is not likely, I believe, or exploitation not detected. However, we know that's not the case anymore, but still on the vendor's website, it still says it's not likely. So we can't trust what vendors say. We can't trust them to update what they say. And another big pain point is they say things like exploited in the wild. This is another big pain point when it comes to prioritizing vulnerabilities, because when a vendor says exploited in the wild, they don't really provide much context on what that means. This is where GreyNoise steps in, because a vulnerability that requires user access and is a targeted attack or was developed and tested in a sandbox isn't the same thing as exploited in the wild or mass exploited. And the difference is exploited can be a targeted attack. It can be a widespread opportunistic attack that you typically see on GreyNoise, where you just have some random host on the internet just scanning the entire internet, the entire IPv4 space to see what's vulnerable and what can be exploited. Those are typically the kind of attacks that I'm super worried about because everyone can be impacted by it. And I mean everyone, because they're scanning every IP address. Even if you don't have that particular product on the internet, they're still scanning you for that particular vulnerability. And then you have more targeted, kind of exploitation attacks, which GreyNoise won't typically pick up on. That's more of like phishing campaigns or targeting a specific business, which depending on your threat model, that is something you should also care about as well. But for the most part, the widespread attacks is what we care about. And that's where GreyNoise steps in. So I'll show you a few examples of that. And then once you start going into the compliance space, you have things like the Sizza known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, which is right here. It's ran by Sizza. And basically they just update this list of CVEs that they are aware of that is being exploited in the wild. I throw that term loosely because, again, one thing that Sizza and these other vendors don't provide is indicators of compromise, so like a hash, known actors that are exploiting this vulnerability, and things of that nature. So what I do, and this is kind of my workflow, is like the Sizza known exploit list. I will download this CSV file or JSON, go ahead and open it up. Now, again, this isn't the most efficient way to handle it, but I will basically take all 800 and some change CVEs right here. I will open it in Sublime Text, which if you don't use Sublime, you are wrong. It is a phenomenal text editing tool. And what I will do is I will take all 800 and some change vulnerabilities on that Sizza list, and I will make it one giant GreyNoise query. So I will hit Control A, Control Shift L. That will let me edit every single line, and I will create a GreyNoise query language query. So it's going to be CVE : and then I'm going to hit Control A, Control Shift L. And I will go back, hit backspace, space, capital OR. I found out it can't be lowercase. And right here is a giant GreyNoise query language query. This is obviously not going to work out because it's way too large. So I actually created a regular expression to break this up into a more feasible size search. So I can do this one of two ways. I can go on the GreyNoise visualizer. So right here, I could just paste that in there. I don't know if this is going to load up much. I don't know if it's too big. So like right there on the Sizza list, we have 149 results. We can break that down even further by last seen or first seen. It's another important thing to check for, because if these all haven't been seen in months, you probably don't need to worry about it right now, but you could see right away we have ones that were scanning the internet today. And then you could break that down by the entire Sizza list. And then you also have the ability to do that in Postman or with their API. So that's kind of my workflow with like the Sizza list and all that. I also have a similar workflow for like Microsoft Patch Tuesday, which is another thing that we have to deal with in the VM space. So what I will do is I will just take this whole list right here, and then I will go back to Sublime, and I will break this down to the CVEs itself. So I will just create a regular expression for CVE numbers, and then I will just do digit 1 through 10, something like that. Hit find all, Control C, Control V. We have all of these CVEs right here, and then I will make it all unique. So there were 60 CVEs in the, let's see, was this the June? So I picked June 2022. So 60 different CVEs in this case. So I will do the same thing I did with the Sizza known exploit list, make it all queryable on GreyNoise. And I can basically take all this, plug that into GreyNoise and see if there are any hits. I don't know if there will be or not. Also might be too large of a search. And I will also see if there's any questions. I've been blabbing on too much, so.
No, you're great. I don't see any questions so far, but folks, feel free to drop them in the chat. You can use the Q&A feature. Yeah, we can keep going for now.
Yeah. So I think I might have hit a limit on what I can use in the visualizer, so that's okay. I'll just break this up kind of arbitrarily here. So I'll just do this, plug that in back into the visualizer, and hit search. Maybe that will work. So we have 17 results. So we have something here. They're all malicious. Great. So what we can do is we can, in the API, I believe, I haven't tested this out yet, but I believe what you could do is you could search by the particular tags. So which tags actually hit here. So it looks like a lot of these are Apache related. CGI script. I don't see anything in here that is Microsoft related, but there's also like a ton of tags on each of these. So some of these IP addresses are just hammering at everything. So apologies for not having that readily available to see which particular CVE is. Oh, no, we got one right here. So we have a RCE. No, that's not it. Let's see. Microsoft CVE 2022 Netgear. It's in here somewhere. So apologies, I don't have that readily available, but what I would do from there is find which CVE is like this particular IP address is scanning for and prioritize that over different detections that you would get normally in Qualys or Tenable. Okay. So is there a GreyNoise query language that returns all CVEs registered in GreyNoise? I actually asked that the other day, and yes, in their API. Let's see if I can find it right here. So we have stats API reference in our documentation. The tags array includes the tag names and count. So yes and no, but I'll let the GreyNoise folks answer that. I was curious about that too.
Yeah, thanks for asking that, and thanks for referencing Remy's tweet. So there is, like you can see by his tweet, there is kind of a way to make it work. We've made a few changes recently to the way that we're presenting data in the visualizer. I have quite a few of our technical product folks on the line too that might be able to answer your question, but like, yes, asterisk. Yeah, and we can get into details. I'm happy to follow up with like exactly what that looks like. So
yeah. That'd be super helpful for myself as well. Just being able to see just like CVE, just all the list of CVEs, and then kind of like a facet analysis that like Shodan has. So like right here, this is what like Shodan, for example, has for everything that they scan for. So for those that aren't familiar with Shodan, I know it's a GreyNoise demo, but it's like kind of the opposite of GreyNoise. They scan the internet and GreyNoise listens to the internet. So cool. So yeah, that's kind of my workflow. So on a given day, I'll have like a list of like 10 different CVEs that we have to prioritize. Let's say they're all CVSS 10s. I would then go to GreyNoise, check all of those CVEs, and if any of them have hits, basically what you can do from there is prioritize those that have hits, and then you can see the either the countries or the actors. You're able to do that in GreyNoise if there's attribution to that particular IP address to an actor, and you'll be able to like boil it down from there. So it's like if your company has a threat model where you're basically getting, you know, your biggest threat is like a nation state. So let's say like Iran, and if you have any hits from like any IPs from Iran, you can boil it down even further from there. And then it also really depends on like your inventory, what your internet facing systems look like. So really at the end of the day, all of this boils down to, if you know what you have which systems you have on the internet. I'd say that's like the biggest thing is asset inventory. So if you have a ton of Cisco stuff, as far as like VPN gateways or whatever, you don't necessarily need to look for other products that aren't Cisco. So I would focus all CVEs that are pertained to Cisco and seeing, what the activity on the internet looks like for that product. So, yeah. So I joined tags to CVEs. Oh, cool.
It looks like, oh, awesome. Thanks, Kimber. Kimber is our product manager and former researcher turned product manager. And she's now handling the kind of CVE aspect and a lot of what research does, but now from a product perspective, which is amazing. Cody, it looks like we have a few questions here, so I'm going to rattle off the first one. Do you always use Postman for results?
I use Postman because it's just easy. I can hop between like Shodan or Qualys or Tenable and GreyNoise. It's just a simplified way. So in this case, like if I pull this up, so I have like a GreyNoise query right here. What I can do is I can actually go to the code section right here and my API keys there. So Supriya, we will work on getting that rotated after this. But like I have the curl request right here, and you can import this into Bash, or you have Python requests over here. So yeah, I like Postman because I could hop between different products, and it has things like parameters and body, and you can add things like oh man, I'm having a brain fart right now. Payloads. So yeah, that's my go-to for API stuff.
Awesome. The next question is, have you made any tooling to automate all of this manual workflow with Sublime Text?
Yes, you could. So for the most part, my use of GreyNoise is kind of ad hoc. Really depends on the kind of the security world with vulnerabilities. There is definitely a possibility. I have like fireworks going off in my head right now of like automatically like on a, hourly basis, checking the Sizza known exploit list, downloading anything new, appending that to a file, and then checking GreyNoise for that. So I don't have anything yet. Hold on. But it is something that is possible given that it's just REST API and all that. So.
Awesome. And then finally, this is kind of more of a question for us. So is GreyNoise going to consider use of an agent for endpoints like other security tools, Nessus Agent, McAfee, et cetera? And the answer to that is currently no, it's not on our roadmap, but I'm making a note of it. So it will be added to our consideration pile. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think to kind of piggyback on that, I think what would be helpful is if you had like an agent that, yeah, I believe my understanding of that question is you have like an executable or something of that nature that an enterprise can deploy on their own systems that would feed back into like a customer GreyNoise interface. That'd be super helpful because then you actually have actionable information of what people are actually targeting on your systems.
Cody, you're reading our mind. Come on, man. We've got another question. What is the importance of first seen, last seen?
Yeah, so first seen really, I wouldn't say it's so much of a vulnerability management. It'd be more of a threat hunting use case. So last seen is obviously important to us because it shows like, okay, well, this vulnerability is still actively being exploited on the internet. So yeah, we should probably work on it. If you plug in a CVE and it hasn't been, scanned across the entire internet in like two years, it's not actively exploited, at least across the entire IPv4 space. First seen is more important for threat hunting because you can then check your, whatever you use, Splunk or whatever it is, to see when you're doing threat hunting, like, okay, well, we have this hash. Let's see the first time we saw that. And you could correlate that with any activity that happened before disclosure or anything of that nature. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say like threat hunting, incident response, even like SOC teams were I was talking to a few other folks and just having that importance of timestamps, right? Like when did your activity correlate with the activity that GreyNoise has seen, or is it, different, or because we know infrastructure turns around all the time. We have someone here asking very important questions, but I'm actually going to wait till the end to answer any of these. So Cody, would you like to continue? Is there anything else we want to pivot on?
I don't have anything off the top of my head. The main use of GreyNoise is differentiating what vendors say and what's actually happening on the internet. I just don't want the words mass exploitation and exploitation to get conflated. Just because it's not mass exploited on the internet doesn't mean it's being exploited, but it's more of a targeted based attack, and mass exploited means everyone's just impacted by it. So that's kind of my use of GreyNoise. I don't know, do y'all have like an integration with tools like Qualys and Tenable or anything of that nature?
That is above my grade. So I know we have like good relationships with those folks, but as far as direct integrations, I think the answer is no. That being said, I know Tenable specifically, like we have like quite a good relationship and information sharing with them too. So cool. Cody, I wanted to ask, like, have you gotten a chance to use the GreyNoise trends page? I know those are individual, right? And it's not as good for like capturing a bunch of information on vulnerabilities, right? What you're doing is obviously like at scale. But I'm wondering if you've gotten a chance to use this or any thoughts around it.
Yeah, so I actually tried playing around with it the other day. Maybe it's just the lack of not being able to poke around with it too much. But I have seen it. Is there like a search functionality we can use right here? Because like I would like to see the trends of like 2021 44228, the log4j vulnerability. Is that something that you could do on here?
So you can do from the tag trends page, which actually is a great note. If you just click on tags, type log4j. One. That one's not a query. That one's actually just text matching. Yeah, log4j should work.
Oh, gotcha. Log4j.
Yep.
Okay.
And you just click on it.
Sweet. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I have seen this before. I think my issue I wasn't able to like punch in like CVE and then punch in, the CVE identifier or something like that. So that was my issue. So yes, this is super helpful because you can, take this kind of information, because at the end of the day, leadership at a lot of companies, they like to see trends and all that. And this is something exactly they would like to see. So it's like, okay, well, is this trending down? Is this trending up? Because like this seems pretty flat, but I know like log4j, they're, everyone's going to be scanning for it because it's just so easy to exploit. But things that are trending down or, have like went from like, 126 hosts down to like 2, like it really helps out with prioritizing that vulnerability over other ones that you might have in your environment.
Definitely. And some of the nice kind of functions from this, right, are the download IP list, which you can just kind of do, or the block and firewall, which is just a short EDL. In fact, yeah, you can copy and paste that API URL into a new tab, Cody.
This one right here?
Yep, exactly. A new tab. And then you will just get the list of IPs that are scanning and exploiting log4j in the last 24 hours. It's updated frequently. So nice way to grab data on specific tags. But for your use case and like what you were doing, yeah, absolutely. The large DMQL Sublime Postman pivot is magic.
Yeah, and for those that don't use Sublime, yeah, it's an amazing tool. Yeah, you can set up like SFTP, SCP on it, so you can interact with text files on a Linux host and OVH or whatever the case is. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's just knowing those tricks. But yeah, someone brought up earlier, automation. Yeah, that's something I can look into and I can maybe share on my GitHub or something like that, because yeah, manual work sucks.
Awesome. If folks have questions, please go ahead and drop them. You can just drop them in the chat. I have quite a few Q&A ones.
Yeah.
Going through here, I'm going to only pick out a few though, because not all of them are safe for work. So the first one is not relevant, but what is the perfect combination of pizza toppings?
Anything but pineapple and fish. So yeah, that's just me. Like, you can hate me for that, but I'm never gonna put a pineapple or fish on my pizza. Anything else is fine with me.
Wrong answer, actually. I'm not a huge proponent of pineapple on pizza, but we can save our controversial pizza opinions for post talk. Someone else asked, what other sources of info would you source for in the wild? Is there anywhere else you would go for in the wild data?
Yes and no. So GreyNoise actually shows exploit activity. It attributes a particular CVE to an IP address, to timestamps and all that. That's showing actual activity happening on the internet. However, mass exploitation is not the same thing as just normal exploitation. So just because it's not on GreyNoise doesn't mean it's not happening. So things like exploitDB, people on Twitter, you have like some forums. I forgot what it's called. Oh gosh, it's where a lot of data leaks go and happen. I forgot the website, what it's called. But you have sites like that. So my big ones are like exploitDB. So is there some semblance of a proof of concept on there? Maybe try it out in a sandbox environment and see what kind of results you get. So
excellent. So I don't think we have any more questions. Folks, happy to take anything more in the chat, but other than that, Cody, kind of last words are yours.
Yeah, I would just say I would encourage folks to integrate GreyNoise into their workflow, mainly because let's see, there's probably I don't know if it's updated. Am I still sharing my screen, by the way? I don't know.
You are.
Okay, so I'm gonna go on the Googs, and I think it's called CVE details. I don't know if the site is still updated or not. Last time I checked, it wasn't. Let's see, CVE by date or vulnerabilities by date. So it looks like it actually has been. As you can see, we're in the 9th month of this year. You could see the count of vulnerabilities by year has obviously exponentially grown over the years. Obviously, not all vulnerabilities are equal. Some are like funny, like someone has a CVE for the default credentials of Raspberry Pis. Don't really care about that, but I care about things like, one-liners and bash. But just to, I guess, sum it up, the amount of vulnerabilities that are being published is not going down. So thinking of ways outside of the box, other than just taking what vendors say and taking CVSS scores as is something you'll need to adapt to. And GreyNoise is a product that fits right into that kind of gap, and it shows what actually matters as far as exploitation on the internet goes. So yeah, if you're just going to stick to patching everything, your teams are you're going to cause a lot of issues with patches not being right, or the list goes on and on. There's so many problems and pain points that we have in vulnerability management. So I'm not saying don't patch everything, but certain things need to be patched immediately. They need to bypass like testing, sandboxing. So like a lot of Microsoft updates, most organizations will deploy that to like a beta group. They will test it, make sure it doesn't break anything. But sometimes when you have something really critical, you have to bypass that, and you have to have the proper tooling to make that call. And I would point straight to GreyNoise. I've done that in the past. It's like, let's bypass testing this because we got all these different IPs right here. Hand that off to the hunt team, and then we have some information to use to leverage to bypass those controls. And obviously you can see here that's never gonna stop because CVEs are just going up every single year. So that's all I got.
Well, thank you so much, Cody. This was amazing. And folks, as I mentioned, we can stay on a little bit after this, but again, this has been a How I Use GreyNoise session with Cody Bernardy. And again, we do this for all of our community. We try to help get people in the spotlight and talk about how they use GreyNoise amongst other tools. So if you or anyone you know is interested in doing one of these, then you can reach out to me, Michael, or Jordyn in the community Slack, or you can email us or tweet at us, whatever is easiest. And we will see you around. I think this is a part of the demo gods, right?
Yeah, exactly. There we go. If it works. Ambiguous redirects. Let's see if it actually generates it. I've never seen ambiguous redirect. That's interesting. But it is running through each one, so let's take a look here. And if it actually pulled it up. Their utilities. Looks like it did indeed generate a report. At least it shows to you. Huh, interesting. It pulled in the IPs, but it didn't seem to actually. Let me see. Let me make sure that to the GreyNoise crew. Let me make sure that I have the correct endpoint here. It should be, yep, noise context. That's right. Oh wait, I bet you it's another one of these formatting things. Weird. Oh, you know what? The lines, the new lines just killed me for some reason. I don't know why the formatting got messed up. But this is what I'm going to do just for the sake of the demo so that we don't have to keep sorting through this. I'm just going to create a report and hopefully the new lines don't get me again. There we go. Live demo. Yep, it is indeed working now. Yes, thank you, Don. As a security practitioner, that is good advice. I will, in fact, be cycling my API tokens. So let me show you how cool. I mean, it's all JSON and, you know, made to look pretty. But like, just to give you a sense of what it's doing. So, you know, it creates this IP file here, and, you know, it just literally just runs through each of them. And as you'll see, it starts from the top and it goes all the way down. Here's 100 IPs, the last 100 IPs. And, you know, it tells you like a ton of useful data. That's why GreyNoise is awesome. Here's one of the tags, you know, ZMAP. So it's opportunistically scanning. This IP is originating from Vietnam. Here's the autonomous system number, like where it exists in the ISP block, some region, Vietnam. And this also shows you like the ports that are open. You know, a lot of like botnets and scanners, they're not always secured properly. So a lot of times when they're scanning ports, they also have ports open. And this is a sure sign that this is probably a malicious entity. And it tells you like all the stuff you want to know. And so from this, you can imagine with tines and in general, you can pull out bits of data and you can say, hey, I want to focus on you know, I want to only focus on, say, certain tags, or I want to look at certain classification, so on. You can really, with JQ, it doesn't have to be JQ, but any tool, even Tines, allows you to just extract bits from the body and really narrow in on anything. Maybe you only want to look at stuff that's happened from the past day, for example, or maybe you want to look at stuff historically that's been around a lot longer. You can do all of that, or even just stuff that's outside the United States. You have almost unlimited flexibility here, which is great. And then you just go through the list, and this is a very big file, but you know, here's the next one. This is known to be malicious, so you could safely filter this out as part of the workflow I showed you with Tines. And the unknowns are really the ones that you want, you know. So if I were to like approach this I would say, okay, where's unknowns? And actually, so there's eight out of these IPs here are unknown. And so you can see that, let's see here, unknown. So there's actually a lot of non-tagged actors here. So these are ones that I would follow up on because they're part of the unknowns, but hopefully that gives you a sense, Don, of what it looks like. Appreciate you bearing with me through the demo.
No, it's great and thrilling to be able to see and go through that live. And I think everyone can agree that nothing ever works on the first try. And if you're not debugging at least a couple times, you're not actually working. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, appreciate that.
Yeah. I see another question from Don as well. A JSON beautifier. Are you, so JSON, I only am using the built-in one from package control. Open the suggestions there. I mean, I haven't actually looked at anything beyond that, but I like the idea about the CIDR IP prefixes. Yeah, totally. You could pull that out. That's good, and that's good feedback. I'll go back to the script and rework it, and see if things will merge it. Anything I can do, and feel free to also submit a pull request if you have functionality you see here that would be helpful. By all means, the script is pretty quickly thrown together and definitely imperfect, but I appreciate the feedback.
Awesome. And Justin, kind of as like, unless other folks have questions, my final kind of question that I'm thinking about is, of course, you have a ton of security experience, as a defender, research, et cetera. What's the action that you would want to take, like with something like this? Obviously, Red Canary tools can be used like at scale. Obviously, they have enterprise offerings, so does GreyNoise, as does Times. So this is a great, like, small microcosm example. But how does this work at scale? And I'd love some advice on actionability of this intelligence.
Yeah, so I think what's neat about Thinks, or the whole idea behind it, and like this is something I'm going to talk about more broadly down the road, the conferences and stuff, is like when you approach things from this new perspective of high fidelity, low volume alerts, Thinks like the canary tokens, you really shouldn't be seeing too many alerts, maybe a few IPs a month, if that, as opposed to the thousands and thousands a day that you'll see in a typical SIM. And so as a result, as you scale and you grow as a company, you'll deploy more and more tokens and you might get a few more alerts, but it shouldn't be overwhelming. And this should fit perfectly into the small workflow that I have with Times, insofar as like the resources you have available with the community edition. Now, as you scale out and let's say you want to start using GreyNoise to look up bulk IPs, like with the research honeypots, or maybe you have a WAF that you're using, like AWS WAF, and right now you're just sending tons of IPs through like Darktrace or Shodan or some service. That, as you grow, I see the need for GreyNoise becoming more and more apparent, because every additional IP would normally result in an analyst having to look it up and investigate. But GreyNoise is going to be able to tell you before it even gets to that point whether it's worth investigating or not. So as you can imagine, as the number of alerts goes up traditionally for a SOC, the value of GreyNoise goes up significantly. And I think this could be the difference between spending hours and hours a day on this and spending like 30 minutes as part of a triage process. But I know that there's so many other things that can be done with GreyNoise that I haven't even tapped into, like the whole packet capture capability and vulnerabilities that you can identify. So really, I see this as like, this was an absolutely essential component of Log4j last year in trying to identify what hosts were vulnerable, because GreyNoise and Andrew in particular were publishing these IP lists that are now part of like the trends, and they're dynamically allowed. But these IPs, I was able to use to basically block stuff with AWS WAF, like dynamically. And that was like super helpful, because otherwise you'd have to look at the IP, take it, put it in, like such a tedious manual process. And that's why I use GreyNoise, because it saves so much time, it enriches the data, and yeah, it's super helpful. So hopefully that answers your question, Supriya.
That's awesome. Well, folks, if there are any other questions, this is a great time to catch us. But Justin, thank you so much for this. This was immensely helpful and insightful,
Thanks.
especially
Thanks for
for all of
having
us on the product side, of course.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. Appreciate it, everyone.
Absolutely. Well, folks, you heard it here. We do these sessions, with folks that are interested in sharing how they're using GreyNoise. So again, if you're interested in doing your own How I Use GreyNoise session, please reach out to community@greynoise.io, and we'll set you up. And yeah, thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See you.